blooming tree at the beginning of summer all across the city. We see the Royal Poinciana all over the place. So Royal Poinciana is another plant that signals us to changes in the season. So when we see those red blooms, that's the beginning of summer. And one of the oldest festivals in our place is named after this tree. It's down in Miami. It is the oldest festival. It's the Royal Poinciana Festival. But this plant, indigenous people would plant near their homes because they knew this about this plant. So in the wintertime, Royal Poinciana drops its leaves. So it lets that sunlight in to warm the space. And then in the summertime, which we're in right now, we can hear the cicada. It grows its leaves back and forms this nice feathery canopy. So this is another hardwood of our place, but this one is a nitrogen fixer. So here in the forest, we have these plants that produce like the acorns that are dropping right now from the oak trees. And then these, like we were talking about, the pigeon peas down below, this is a nitrogen fixing mother big tree that will feed other trees around it. Because it has that special superpower to take the nitrogen from the air that other trees don't have. They're called support species. So breathing in the fresh air, feeling your feet on the ground. And we're about to round the corner heading over to our food forest garden. But before we get there, we're going to see the king of the epiphytes. So epiphytes are plants that live on other plants. So we've got the resurrection fern, remember from the beginning of our tour, growing all over the trees. But now we're going to start to see some different epiphytes through this area. So we've actually got wild orchids here in the park. Florida has wild orchids that used to grow all over the place until everybody was like, yo, those orchids are sweet! And they took them all off of our trees. So actually at our grand opening a month or two ago, there's a project called the Million Orchids Project here in Fort Lauderdale. So we're planting these native orchids, but there's actually a native orchid at the entrance where we just were, and we'll see one as we head back here. So how these air plants, the epiphytes, come to be on the trees is through the wind or through the birds, where these seeds, they land on that craggy bark and they start to grow. So you'll see an air plant right up there. It's related to the bromeliads with the open leaves. And we're going to start to see a lot more air plants as we round this corner. After a good windstorm, they're all down on the ground.
Are you going on the boardwalk?
No.
No.
We're sticking to the regular place. So through here is an invasive exhibit once again. We've got a lot of the air potato, but this spiky plant right here is known as mother-in-law's tongue or snake plant. So one way we can harness the energy of our parks is by using the invasive plants. How this plant probably got into our place was because it was once a house plant that got released, kind of like iguanas and things like that. But this plant is really good at purifying air. And so I encourage you all to come to the park, and you can take, I'm going to turn off my mic. You can take little rhizomes like this and pull them up. I always like to ask permission beforehand. I always take a moment and say, hey, mother plant, can I take home your baby with me? I find I have greater success when I do so, and it's also just kind to do to plants. But what we can do is pull up. Oh, I didn't get any root. Little starters like this, and we can plant them in a pot and use them as a house plant in our home to purify our air, and we're also helping to take them out of the park as well too. So if anybody wants to take this one home, you're welcome to do so. It's known as snake plant. The mother-in-law's tongue. So there's always a creature in this tree. We've got a squirrel. But sometimes there's a raccoon, sometimes there's iguanas. Seems to be a favorite spot of the Snyder Park community. This is also where a lot of the iguanas like to hang out too. If you want to do some iguana spotting, there's like a little circle over there. My friend Chip, the one who takes pictures of the butterflies, he said sees the most variety of lizards over there.
That tree over there.
Who do you see? Oh yeah, there's a black spiny tail. It looks like somebody definitely lives at the base of that tree over there. So back to epiphytes. We see these plants growing on other plants. We see them all over the oak trees. But there's one epiphyte that went wild. And we can see it right here behind us. Oh, there's so many black spiny tails back here. Hello, you guys.
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing, just doing a nature tour.
All right.
We got some nice cloud cover right now. I was like, everyone's going to be really hot on this summer nature tour, but it's pretty nice. So the king of the epiphytes is right before us. This is a strangler fig. So this plant is in the same family as fig Newtons, but doesn't produce an edible pod. It's in the ficus family. And what happens here is, just like the other air plants, seeds will be laid at the top of a tree, but then the strangler fig starts to send down these aerial roots. So these Tarzan-like roots that are hanging down, they start to overtake the tree and will eventually kill the tree beneath it. So what was here before was a gumbo limbo, and the strangler fig moved in and started to suppress and take the life force energy from that tree and eventually become its own tree. And so epiphytes can sometimes be plants just living on other plants, but they can also be amazing, like the strangler fig. And so in our heads we're like, is this an invasive plant? But strangler figs are native to our place as well too. So it's all quite relative in the game of what's allowed and what's not. Just a big snake. What color? Wow. So we're rounding the corner here. We're coming into Cherry Alley, and we're going to be spit out right in our food forest. Cicada's being quiet for us now. Thank you, Cicada. So around the bend right here, we have some wild citrus. I brought you citrus today, Scott, from my tree. All right, everybody. So who grew up here in Florida? Raise your hand. Who's lived here in Florida for a really long time? Who's tried to grow citrus before and it hasn't worked out? All right, well, I've got hope for you right here. And so here's the story of citrus in our place. Florida, the Sunshine State, orange juice everywhere, but where are all the citrus trees? Where did they go? So what happened was, we were talking about at the beginning of our tour, the way we think of growing food is we're like, okay, we'll clear this whole area, we'll put in about 500 orange trees, and it's gonna work out. But it did not work out. Something happened called citrus greening or citrus canker, which was a psyllid that came over and started to attack our citrus trees. And so what happened was, is in the early 2000s, they were ripping citrus out of people's yards, and they were like, what are we gonna do? And we haven't really been able to grow citrus since. However, there's been some amazing things that have been going on in the understory, in the forest, to rehabilitate this story. So this is wild citrus before us right here. It's being eaten a little bit, you can see by the weevils. But there's something that's going on with citrus where we're starting to understand that citrus doesn't want to be out in full sun. It doesn't want to be put in rows in the field. It makes it more susceptible to citrus greening. And also, there seems to be some sort of symbiotic relationship, so a good relationship between citrus and oak trees. So we don't know if it's the tannins in the leaves or what, but there's some amazing abandoned citrus groves up in north central Florida. One will be, we're going to the Florida permaculture group. A lot of what I'm teaching you today is permaculture. But there's this location that was an abandoned citrus grove that has now been rehabbed in the last 3 years. So there's this big overstory of trees that were able to grow for the last 20